I want to talk to you guys about when the right time to buy an original of something is, a copy of something, or a boutique version of something.
Give me an example.
So, we are going to talk about, okay, this is the big one. The Klon.
Okay.
Are you going to buy the original Klon for $4 or $5 grand?
Nope.
Are you going to buy a copy of it, which
What?
is like the Warm Audio
Okay.
or Behringer, that new Behringer Centaur pedal?
Okay. I mean, that is kind of blatant. Yeah.
Or are you going to buy the boutique copy of it, which is like the Mythos Mjolnir, or whatever version you like the idea of, something that's kind of hard to get a hold of, or something that's a little more expensive with their little tweak on it.
Would you say a Wampler Tumnus is boutique?
I would say Wampler Tumnus is probably boutique.
Okay.
So that kind of gets in a whole nother conversation, but I would say like their own little twist on something, right?
Okay.
Brian Wampler definitely put his own spin on the Klon.
Yeah.
But that's just one thing. You could say the same thing for Les Pauls. You could say the same thing for Strats.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to buy a 61 Stratocaster? You going to buy a vintage reissue? Or are you going to buy a Jeff Sin Strat, right? So when's the right time to buy one, or what's your kind of thoughts?
I like to think of myself as frugal,
Okay.
smart with my money.
Right.
Not saying I always am,
Right.
but I try to be. If I can afford the original and it's not outrageous, but also the original is truly a more inspiring circuit, guitar, whatever,
Yep.
amp, then I try to go for that. Now, if you're talking about a 61 Strat, this guy can't afford it.
Yeah, that's and
If you're talking about a $4,000 actual Klon,
Mhm.
I'm out.
Right.
Now, if you're going from like this type of Marshall
Mhm.
to, let's say, a Friedman,
Yep.
I would rather have this.
Yeah.
The Friedman is a little too like perfect sounding for me. Like it sounds like it mixed and ready to go in the studio.
Right.
But I like the inconsistencies
Yeah.
and the harmonics of this.
Okay.
So that's kind of where I lie with that. Now, I think a Marshall Blues Breaker, I think I would rather have the original circuit than some copy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to me, when I hear the Blues Breaker and I hear a copy of it, I'm typically more inspired by the original.
Yeah.
And it's not crazy expensive
Right.
compared to a Klon. All right, so that's the original. If I can go with the original and like it makes sense in my head and price point, then I go with it, and it's more inspiring, right?
Mm-hmm.
A direct copy like Warm Audio or Behringer,
Yep.
man, it is hard to justify not paying $70 for a Behringer pedal, and it sounds almost identical to a Klon.
Right.
That is hard to not go that route.
Right. But
I feel gross doing it.
I think there's two versions of the original thing too, right? Or the copy, I'm sorry. So you've got the original thing. Let's talk about like Nobles.
Okay.
You got an original Nobles ODR1. Now they're selling in the ballpark of $1,000 to $1,500. You could almost call the copy of that is a standard Nobles ODR1.
Sure.
And if that's the case, that feels completely different to me than the Warm Audio version or the Behringer version.
I agree, because at least it's the same company and you're trying to represent the same name.
Yeah, you're buying, Electro Harmonics. Maybe you're not buying the original Deluxe Memory Man because now they're $1,000. You step on it one time and it breaks, and you got to get fixed. And you step on it one time, it
Right.
breaks.
You got
and
the
you
Memory
fixed.
Toy or Memory Boy.
You get the Electro Harmonics version of something.
Right.
Like that feels much different to me.
Yeah, I agree. So, when it comes to a copy, I feel gross like with Behringer because it is the enclosure is the same. It literally says Centaur on the box.
Yep.
But I'm much happier paying $70 than $4,000.
Yeah.
That being said, I typically go the boutique route.
Okay.
So, I have a Wampler Tumnus, and it's just kind of like a little more of everything. It has more bass, it has more gain, has more volume, I feel like. So that's kind of the route I went. I'm not buying original Klein. That's
Right.
And to be fair, like the Behringer pedal wasn't out when I bought this Tumnus.
I don't
But
think you would have bought it anyway.
I don't think I would have either. I would have either bought the Tumnus or Rocket Archer.
Yeah. Especially after doing our Klon shootout.
Right, which you guys need to check out. So I feel like I would go the boutique route if the original is crazy expensive or if it is just as inspiring. But like I said, if I'm going for the Marshall sound, I want this. I don't necessarily want the Freeman. Freeman is like a souped up, it's like a hot rodded car.
Yeah.
I just want the car.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So that's where I lie with all of that. I think the copies, I don't know. It's really difficult for manufacturers to have validity to their name, especially when people are trying to copy the exact color scheme. They're trying to copy the exact circuit. I mean, I feel bad for manufacturers because it's not an easy game to play anymore.
No.
I think boutique is kind of the way to go. And when we say boutique, like I'm not spending crazy amounts of money. Like
I know what you're saying. You're not buying a historic makeover Les Paul that's worth $15,000.
And kind of going the guitar route, like I would much rather buy a Gibson Les Paul than a Heritage Les Paul.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm weird. I don't know. But that's just kind of where I am.
Yeah, I think I feel in the same boat as you do, kind of, with most of this stuff. I think it's great to get the original, and I want to get as close to the original as possible within reason. It's also a use case thing. If you're taking this stuff out and gigging it, well, I don't want to take, a Vox AC30 that's on the fritz and I'm having to work on all the time from 1961 with my deluxe Memory Man that maybe when I step on it, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. With my Nobles pedal that maybe if I step on it, it finally breaks and I have to get it rehoused and stuff. Like some of those, which the Nobles, if you get it rehoused, that's completely different. But some of those things, it doesn't make sense to be out gigging the originals and doing that stuff. If you're a studio guy that you can take care of it and have somebody working on it all the time, and if it doesn't work, it's okay because you got another one you can just throw on here, that's a different thing too.
Especially for us local musicians. Yeah, it really doesn't add up.
I realized, and you realized too at about the same point, that so many of these guitar cliches are cliches for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
A Les Paul into a Marshall, cranked up, there is nothing like it. It's visceral, it's, punchy. It's all the adjectives you ever want to give guitar, rock guitar especially. Mm-hmm. It has all of them.
Yeah.
You plug a Telecaster in a Fender Deluxe and turn it up to 4, or a Stratocaster into it, or whatever. You start thinking about all these cliches, a Martin D28 or 18. These cliches are set up for a reason. So I love to get the most original version of that makes sense to me.
And I think the reason why we feel that way is because the records in our head are the tones that we're searching.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if we were going for a completely unique sound, we would probably veer off that path.
Absolutely.
So the viewer might not feel the same way we do.
Yeah, and I totally understand. And there's guitar equipment that I own that is just, I call them play toys and like just fun practice things. And that is the stuff that falls in the realm of unique things that isn't more classic and more original. That falls into boutique stuff a lot of times and oddball things. However, for my daily application, it is really inspiring to be playing a guitar like my Les Paul and looking down and seeing, there's something in my head about seeing that Gibson headstock. When you play your SG and you see that Gibson headstock, or we play Telecasters and you see a Fender headstock on the other end. As much as I love some of this boutique stuff that's out there, and it does make sense sometimes, especially for guitars, it is really hard for me to change my route. I feel that way about amps a lot of times because there's something special about these amps. However, I've played a Tone King Imperial that's just a fantastic deluxe reverb kind of combo.
Right.
Unbelievable. So there's times for all of it, but I do think pedals a lot of times fall in that boutique category for me.
Pedals for sure.
Sometimes originals when you're talking like Phase 90s or whatever, pedals like that.
Boss DM2.
But then if you get into the old ones, you're talking high dollar. I mean, what's a Script Logo Phase 90 from the 70s cost now? It's not cheap.
I was about to say, to me, like, you have to go into practicality, what you're inspired by the most, and just honestly do pros and cons. a lot of companies nowadays are making spin-offs, and you can really find most of everything. I mean, there's so many pedals out there, especially.
Oh yeah.
But like amps too. Everything. You know what I think's funny is when you go to like a new manufacturer and they're like, "This is Marshall-esque,"
Yeah.
or "This is Vox-like." It's like everybody's recreating the same stuff
It's okay.
to a point.
Yeah.
But like, you kind of get to where you're like, why don't I just get the real thing? Like,
Yeah.
everyone's trying to do their own spin on it. And
Unless they've got a unique twist that makes it something completely different.
super user friendly or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yep.
You
But
know,
yeah,
if you need an effects loop or you want to go direct out, like, I understand why people look at different options. I'm just saying, like, it's just funny how everyone compares it to the last thing.
so go with the original when it makes sense financially
Mm-hmm.
and whenever it makes sense with like gigs or whatever you're going to use it for.
Mm-hmm.
Go with a copy if you have to financially, right?
Right.
Or,
And there's nothing against that.
or no, that's cool.
But we are able, because we play local gigs, to get more of the boutique.
And then
pedals.
also too, if you put copies in the same category as like the new Waza DM2, like if that's a copy, like maybe that falls in that
It
category.
feels different.
It feels different. And then boutique, yeah, that's talking the Wampler Tumnus. That's talking the J Rocket Archer, and that's talking that type of stuff. And I think I look at that whenever I want the original, but the original is,
What about a Collins guitar? Is that boutique or a copy?
I think that's boutique.
Okay.
They kind of have their own spin on some of that stuff, but then they've got some models that are almost copies.
Right.
They're all great guitars. All
I
those models.
love Collins. I'm not digging on them.
Great
I'm just-
guitars, but I've played a handful of them and I've really liked them, and I've looked down at them and just thought, I can't pull the trigger.
You know what's also something that we didn't think about with this whole thing is that consistency, because we've talked about 335s are kind of like fish in a barrel. You don't know what you're, well, not fish in a barrel.
No.
It's like trying to, fish out in the sea. Like
There you go.
you don't know what you're gonna get.
Yeah.
But with Gibson 335s, but I will say Collins, Heritage, they do make great representations. So for consistency purposes, I do understand why they go that
A
route.
smaller batch definitely makes a lot of sense because they can find that, K-line guitars are that way whenever you're looking at Fender stuff.
K-Line is
Every
fantastic.
K-line I've ever played has been super consistent
Phenomenal.
and great guitars.
And to me, those don't feel like copies whatsoever.
It kind of feels like a little twist to some degree, even though it's a Strat or Tele style. There's something about those guitars.
They have a mojo.
They do. Anyway, that's kind of our thoughts. What's you guys' thoughts? Let us know down below. See you guys next week.
See ya.